I'm joined now by Mike Bako. He's the sports editor for the DailyNational.com. Mike, you've covered these Olympics in the past. It always seems like the lead up somewhere a month beforehand, a couple of weeks beforehand, there's always this crisis. I remember in Sochi, they didn't have that housing ready. And then, some of the stadiums aren't ready on time. Can you talk about how this is different for China? Because they've been there before. I mean, in some respects, they can dodge the bullet because they already had some infrastructure in place from the last Olympics.
Absolutely, you nailed it. If you think back to Sochi and we doing these sorts of interviews leading up to the event, to the start of the athletes going into the Olympic Village, no plumbing in some of the rooms, holes in some of the rooms. That's not really the case here. Not only do they have the infrastructure from having hosted the games previously, but they've been ahead of schedule in terms of some of their construction efforts. But then certainly COVID played a part in terms of ramping up their production, in terms of getting the Olympic Village ready, getting this closed loop system ready, because all of this is contingent upon keeping the athletes safe. So you couldn't have a situation where they're just leading up to the games and just barely crossing the finish line of having everything done. The only way that this is going to be a success, and the only way that they think that they could pull this off, is to have everything organized, have everything tested, and that's what they've been doing. And now with just about a month out to go, everything seems to be ready to go as they've opened up the closed loop system.
Omicron, so contagious. We've seen it just devastating so many sports teams. I mean, here in Washington, D.C., we saw almost the whole football team wiped out, and we're seeing it in hockey. We're seeing it everywhere. It's a real concern. We just heard the testing regimen, which sounds really quite dramatic, quite stringent. They've got everything in place. But talk to us about these lingering concerns, because it just seems like outbreaks just happen like that.
Well, they're not just lingering concerns. These are the immediate concerns that organizers are trying to plan for. But how do you plan for this? Like you mentioned, you could have an NBA team or an NHL team just have it rip through the team just that quickly. So that's why these measures are being put into place in terms of an unvaccinated athlete needing to quarantine for 21 days. Daily testing regimen. Now, NBA, NFL, NHL, they follow a similar method of testing every day, and that's why all of these positives are coming up. Very few symptomatic athletes or the coaches that are now being put into their protocols. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Olympic athletes, and certainly be interested to see what happens over the next month or so. How does Omicron pass its way through not only America, but the rest of the world? Certainly we, among many other nations, are during this first wave, but you're going to have athletes coming from all over the world. So it's going to be interesting to see how that flow of the virus seeping through the rest of the world affects positive rates and affects athletes coming over.
Mike, what's it like for these athletes 1 month out? Because, mentally you have to get ready for the games, but then, when you listen to the NBA players who were in that bubble, I mean, it's kind of like being in solitary confinement. It's tough. That's a whole nother element to all of this. What's it like? How do they get ready for this mentally?
I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to prime your body and to prime your mind to be at its peak as you are having this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You have to think about, you are on your training schedule. You know exactly when you're training. You know what you need to do leading up to your specific event. Once you get to the closed-loop system of the village, you're not going to be able to do that. So one of the things that you have to think about is, how do you mentally get yourself ready when you can't train? So it's going to be as much of a challenge mentally as it's going to be physically. And certainly we saw it with the NBA players. There were some players that very openly spoke about the mental sort of struggles that they had and how it affected their play. Certainly they were going to be there longer than some of these athletes are going to be, but still this might be a first time and a very unwelcome time to be going through all of this, when it really is your one time every 4 years to shine.
Mike, always great talking to you. Please tell your wife I miss her Christmas decorations. They were quite dramatic last time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.